Welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler. Legs, it's good to have you back, man. We haven't chatted in a while.
No, not at all, man. I'm looking forward to it. We got this. We're talking again tomorrow. It's going to be good, man. Looking forward to it.
We've got a lot of Legler coming up, and it's going to be great. All right, three things today. Let's talk Phoenix Suns. Let's talk Jaylen Brown, and let's talk Dallas Mavericks. Let's start with the Suns. I know you have some pretty strong opinions right now about where this team is at. I just want to get your general thoughts about the team, and also yesterday, giving up 140 points to the Bucks, no Giannis. Where are the Phoenix Suns at right now in your mind?
JJ, this was one of those situations where, when it came together, I think everybody was pretty excited about what it could look like. And we know that they've had a very difficult time putting all three of their star players on the court at the same time. So I think the mentality has been, for me and for pretty much everybody that does this for a living, patience. Let's see, give them time. They've got to develop a flow and a rhythm. I'm just so far past that after what I watched yesterday. I can't take this team seriously. When I watched a game yesterday in which I saw a group of guys that could not possibly be less interested in playing basketball than they were yesterday. I can't even put strong enough words to it. You're playing against the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you give up 140 points. You give up 24 made threes without them having that presence that draws all of that extra attention that leads to nights like that. We know the Bucks can light it up from three. They take a lot. They can make a lot. They can put together games where they string them together. But Giannis has usually got to be a piece of that. And he wasn't even out there. And I just couldn't believe what I was watching in terms of the apathy defensively. And look, I'm not one of those guys that'll just look at a box score or look at a number and say, wow, they didn't play any defense. Because I actually thought they played decent defense against the Celtics a couple games ago when they gave up a pretty big number. But I felt like they were fairly energized, and Celtics were just playing out of their minds, as they can do when they shoot threes like that. And they buried them. And look, that Boston Celtics, when they get it going, are the best offensive team in the NBA. I felt like the Suns were competing. Yesterday is a joke. That's an absolute joke. That's not NBA caliber. That's certainly not contender caliber. And I'm at the point now where, man, my patience has kind of run out with talking about this team and like waiting for it to come together and all the stuff that we say about teams like this. Wow, would you really want to play the Phoenix Suns in the first round series? And, they still have Kevin Durant. And like, that's all this stuff. There's all these qualifiers that we use with the Phoenix Suns. And what I watched yesterday, for me right now, has taken them out of that conversation. So they're going to have to, for me personally, they're going to have to do something dramatically different here over the last, month of the season, heading into the postseason, to change my mind that this is a team that could be potentially dangerous. Because that was a team yesterday that absolutely did not feel like competing. And that's a different conversation than what we're talking all the time with flow and rhythm and getting guys together, and they just need more time. That's a different conversation than what I watched yesterday. It was grotesque. It was grotesque. That's all I can tell you, because you're sitting down thinking, okay, I know Giannis isn't playing, but maybe this would be a good barometer game, maybe a measuring stick game for the Suns. And it was. It showed me like who they really are. And it's a group of guys that aren't very connected right now. And that was pretty embarrassing. For me, that was an embarrassing effort yesterday.
Question for you, because I know you rewatched the game. You watched it live, and then you rewatched it last night. Was there anything specific defensively in terms of their breakdowns? You mentioned the apathy, you mentioned the lack of energy. Did you see anything specific defensively in terms of their coverages or rotations where you said to yourself, that's interesting?
I think the two things that jumped out to me, they were completely, I don't know if confused is the right word, because you shouldn't be confused. They've got cerebral players. They've got high IQ guys. The first initial surge up the court by the Bucks on pretty much anything, make, miss, turnover, long rebound, whatever it may be, the number of times that Phoenix ran back completely out of balance in their initial just transition defense to get back to, at least offer some resistance for that first push which is going to lead to a paint touch and then a kick out three or a throw ahead three, whatever it may be. They were completely lost, like time and time again. So like what the Bucks got into immediately was something great. Whether that was a throw ahead and a dribble drive, throw ahead, and somebody's just walking into a wide open 3-point shot. So that was the first thing that jumped out. And then the number of times they got beat off the dribble with the obvious next guy to slide over and protect on penetration and force, Milwaukee then to string together a couple of passes on the weak side. That was pretty much non-existent. If you got beat off the dribble, you were toast. There was nobody there. No, and I'm also going to say, like, the initial, even just the pride, with the exception probably of Grayson Allen, who competes. Like Grayson Allen, he competes, and he was like down and ready and in a stance, and he's trying to get after somebody. And even if he got beat off the dribble, there was no help coming. But most of the other players on the court, that initial even blow by, like whatever you wanted to do quickly to get by me, you have at it. And they were just opening up and letting guys go. And then the demoralization kicked in. Because even Durant, like the body language and just the head down and shuffling up the court offensively after another easy basket given up. It just, that looked like a team yesterday. If I just, JJ, looked at their defensive effort, their body language, their lack of connectivity, that looked like a team like, say, the Washington Wizards playing out the string with 15 to go, and guys are kind of fractured, and you're just kind of thinking about getting to the summer, and guys are putting up numbers on a given night or whatever it may be. That's what it looked like. That didn't look like a team with 3 players on it that are 3 of the best offensive players in this league that should be, contending in the Western Conference. That's not what I saw yesterday. And so you asked for like one thing, there was too many to count on the breakdowns.
I understand what you're saying about this time of year and teams essentially just trying to get to the end. And that's typical of teams that are bad, that are at the bottom of the standings, and they just want to make sure they essentially take care of their individual stuff, right, and get to the end of the season healthy and go to Turks and Caicos, right? That's right. That's not the mindset of a team that, and this is not just specific to Phoenix, it's not the mindset of a team that is supposed to be gearing up for a deep playoff run, supposed to be a legitimate contender. Some interesting stuff here. Suns are now 7-7 in their last 14 when all 3 of their big 3 play, when Durant, Booker, and Beal play. Fourth quarter, still such a fucking issue with this team. Worst offense in the league in the fourth quarter. Bottom 5 defense in the first quarter. They've tried to play faster in the fourth. They were towards the bottom of the entire NBA in pace in the fourth quarter. Over the last month or so, they've tried to play faster. Their offense still has really struggled. Specifically to that, because yesterday is an example. Like Kevin Durant went scoreless in the fourth quarter, played over 11 minutes. It's the most minutes in the fourth quarter for him, and to go scoreless. For that to happen, that hasn't happened since 2009. He's got 4 points in his last 3 fourth quarters played. That is tied for the fewest points in the fourth quarter in a 3-game span in 15 years for him.
He's got 4 more than I do in that same span.
Yeah.
Sum that up. Well, that's what we're talking about here.
The offense for them it's interesting because it feels like at times it very much becomes, all right, we're going to get the ball to this guy and we're going to allow him to just have his turn. There's not necessarily a ton of movement where you're getting guys on the move, on the run, second side action. For Kevin Durant to have 4 points over the last 3, fourth quarters, for him to go scoreless, it's befuddling the way they are operating specifically in that part of the game. And, you see, like early in the game, there was some action where they ran a little misdirection pick and roll right into a Nurkic. Instead of rolling, he set a pin down to get Kevin Durant to the elbow. it just feels like there's not enough of that. And even when they do that at times, the guys, whether it's Beal, Booker, Durant, whatever, it's the catch, and then it's waiting. All right, I'm in ISO. I'm gonna try to score, or I'm gonna try to make a play, but it's against the set defense, and there's just not enough oomph. There's not enough juice to their offense in the fourth quarter. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. And that's not just the fourth quarter, it's throughout the game. And they've had moments, they've had some games where I thought they were starting to figure it out and get it together. And I love them when they run whatever action they're going to run initially and the ball goes, Nurkic gets a touch on a slip or a dive. He's just so important to make him touch it because he will finish at a high rate in the paint. And just the reaction it forces when Durant, Beal, or Booker come off that screen, they're typically going to draw 1.5 to 2 guys. And then Nurkic gets that touch because it will force and you could be as disciplined as you want and say, hey, we're going to let Nurkic have as many as he wants on these slips and play one-on-one at the rim and stay home with those corner shooters like Allen and O'Neal and whoever else it may be. But in the moment, we know this defensively, it's in a moment, your gut reaction is, if you're guarding one of those corner shooters, is to get down to at least the edge of the lane on that slip, right? And you can't help yourself. So I've seen them play that way, where he gets a touch, and then it will come out from there. If they do rotate over, it'll come out, and now maybe it'll be Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, or maybe it goes back out to one of the stars, and they attack a closeout guy. And then there's one more swing, and then there's an on-balance open three. I've seen them play that way for short spurts, and you start to think they're turning a corner with that. And what I saw yesterday was something entirely different. And look, I was out there, whatever that was, 10 days ago, whenever it was. I sat courtside. I called the game against Boston at home that they didn't have Booker that night. Boston had just lost 2 straight, and it was in Phoenix. And I thought the Suns really competed in that game. I was not sensing, wow, there's no resistance here. I was actually kind of surprised the amount of contact that was being allowed with hands and forearms on the perimeter on ball handlers like that. Yet most games, you don't see it like that. They were letting those guys play through contact. I was impressed with the physicality of it. And ultimately, Boston just had too much, and they wanted to end the losing streak. They lost 2 straight, hadn't lost 3 in a row all year. You could see they were definitely out. They needed to get that game. I thought Phoenix competed, and they just didn't have enough ultimately in the fourth quarter. That's not what this was yesterday. I don't know how you explain a team going through the motions defensively like that when you're getting the Bucks without Giannis. Like, you got to be thinking to yourself, you're precariously situated out there in the West. Like, this is an opportunity that should elicit a greater defensive reaction out of you without Giannis. There's no way that you can look at this and say, oh, well, they just didn't really, they didn't have Giannis, so they didn't get up for the game. Come on, man, you're not positioned like that to come out there and play that way. And so that's why this is like very concerning what happened yesterday, because to me, that was a preseason level effort. And maybe not even doing preseason justice, because preseason at JJ, you'll have a handful of guys out there trying to make the team that are just diving over loose balls and leaving skin on the floor, right? So maybe I'm not even doing it justice by calling it that. It was more like a scrimmage feel to it, or like a health club pickup game. That's kind of what it felt like from Phoenix's standpoint. And then once they got down 18-20, just the lack of competitive will to say, man, come on, timeout, out of the timeout, here's a 12-0 run. Like, this is ridiculous. Never saw it. Never saw that. I just thought it was a bad sign, man. I just think this time of year, the year they've had, to lay an egg like that in terms of your effort, it's going to be hard for me to erase that one out of my mind every time I have to evaluate the Suns.
You bring up the key, one of the key pieces in that offense is Nurkic and his ability to play make out of the high post, play make out of the short roll. I was calling the game last Saturday against Boston, and both Bradley Beal and Frank Vogel talked about the importance of Bradley Beal as a driver, just getting paint touches, whether it's a snake where he, keeps the ball out of pick and roll, but just his ability to get downhill in the paint, get it in the paint. This is a team in terms of a shot profile. They take a ton of mid-range shots. They don't take a ton of shots at the rim. Durant and Booker are going to get the headlines on this team, but Beal and Nurkic, and obviously Grayson Allen and his shooting, Beal and Nurkic, both of them so important to trying to make this offense work, particularly in the fourth quarter, giving them something other than just Booker and Durant ISOs. And you bring up the precarious Western Conference standings. Let's just check in on that real quick. So Sacramento, with 28 losses, is in 6th. Both Dallas and Phoenix identical records at 39 and 29. Dallas in 7th, Phoenix in 8th. Those guys are just 2 games up right now on the Golden State Warriors with 31 losses. 3 games up, but I only count losses because you still got to play all 82 games. So 2 games up in the loss column on the Golden State Warriors. Dallas with a huge win last night against the Denver Nuggets. Is it safe to say that Kyrie Irving buzzer beater was it's one of, if not the most ridiculous buzzer beaters I've ever seen in my life at any level. And by the way, I'm including 3/4 court heaves that go viral from high school. The left-handed 20-foot running hook shot over Nikola Jokic. When people talk about Kyrie Irving being the most skilled player ever, and I'm not here to debate that day or debate that today, but when people talk about that, it's because of moments like this. The confidence to shoot that shot and have it go in is just insane.
Yeah, here's the thing. You're not one word that you just said is hyperbole. There's no overstatement. I don't know that I would have enough words to accurately describe what I watched on that play, because the thing is, it wasn't anything about that was flukish. He shot the basketball the way he wanted to shoot the basketball with his left hand. It was kind of a weird, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't really a jumper. It wasn't really a floater where like your palm is like behind the ball, right? It wasn't a hook shot. It was like a combination of all 3 of those things in one, with Jokic with an outstretched hand. And look, I thought a huge win for them. As well as they played, and I thought they played really hard in this game. I thought Denver came to play. And you could see that by the emotion out of Mike Malone at times throughout this game. Like, at one point, remember him calling the timeout and screaming at his guys as they're coming off the court to grab a rebound after Dallas had just had 3 straight possessions where they got offensive rebounds. And finally, one possession, they got 3 shots and led to a bucket. And you could just see the way that they played, competed, the way he was at, like they wanted this game. This was a big game. Everybody's out there. We didn't know if Luka was going to play. He plays. Denver's got their guys. Like this lived up to it. And so for Dallas, if they had lost that game in overtime, it just it gives you, even though like, hey, maybe they lose on a buzzer beater in overtime to Denver. Doesn't matter like that we played really well against them. It's the same gut punch feeling. It's demoralizing. They had to finish the deal in this game because I've been high on Dallas since they made the acquisitions at the trading deadline, and I'm not changing the way I feel. And what you saw yesterday in the way that those 2 star players played and the way Kyrie finished that game tells you why. I like the new pieces. They fit. The Lively fits. Gafford fits. They can shoot it. And then they've got these 2 guys that can absolutely trump anything that's put in front of them defensively, any scheme, any matchup, anything, any effort, whatever it may be. There's no real answer for either one of those guys. And Kyrie reminded us that this is one of the most special offensive talents this league has ever seen. There's a lot that comes with Kyrie Irving. A lot of things we've talked about have nothing to do with basketball over the course of the last, half a dozen years or more. But there is no denying that this is one of the most sensational offensive talents this league has ever seen. And what he did at the end of that game defies any logic that ball can go in. And the reaction of Luka was tremendous. And like the whole team, that looks like a team that, just punched their ticket to the Final Four. Like that's the reaction you get, out of that. And it's amazing. So it was amazing to watch. And I don't know that I've watched that shot probably 10, 12 times just to see, am I missing something here? Was there anything about this that was luck? That was one eye closed? Like what was going on here? Nothing. That was pure, man. He did what he wanted to do. And he made one of the most incredible buzzer beating shots that this game has ever seen.
Did you call it maybe a throw? Is that what did you call it a throw? You said it wasn't really a runner.
It wasn't a runner and it wasn't a jump shot. It was a little bit of all 3.
Yeah. Almost
in
like a
one
little,
shot.
almost like a little baseball toss, like a left-handed baseball toss.
And his hand kind of twisted. He
Well,
twisted
it's
it a little
interesting
bit.
because when he going that direction, right, shooting with your offhand, it's almost like he had to put a little action on it. You know what I mean?
That's such a great point, JJ, because you're right. Look, we've all, you're a great shooter. I was a great shooter. Like we can make all kinds of crazy shit. Like people would be shocked at some of the shit we would do, right? Messing around or whatever, or even in a game sometimes. Going to your right, like I could go to my left hand and shoot like a little fade, similar to how I would go to my left and shoot a fade. Right? I could do that, but to go left with a hand coming at you this way, this side of your body, which you're obscuring the rim, to put that ball out to the side while you're drifting left and not have the ball go left of the rim, that's incredible. So to do that, you had to kind of put that little twist at the end to get the inertia going back in the opposite direction from his body, man. It was unreal. And Dallas it's been a little bit of a wild ride for them. And they were so good initially with these acquisitions, and then they struggled, and now they're playing well again. So they're thoroughly in the mix. They've embedded themselves, man. And you talk about dangerous. That's dangerous.
I want to get to that in a second. There's a few things I just wanted to point out. Number one, on Kyrie Irving, over the last 4 seasons, there are 48 players in the NBA to take 250 or more non-dunk shots at the rim with both hands. So 250 left-handed non-dunk shots at the rim, 250 right-handed non-dunk shots at the rim. 48 players have done that. Only 4 players have shot 55% or better. Kyrie Irving is one of them. Nikola Jokic, Drew Holiday. You see Drew use his left all the time. The 4th guy, by the way, I was shocked to see this. Buddy Hield. How about that? Wow. Buddy Hield. But when we talk about, everybody talks about Kyrie Irving's finishes, and sometimes with certain guys, you're like, you see a highlight tape, and it's like, this guy's a great finisher. And then you go look up the numbers, and you're like, no, he's not. With Kyrie, the reputation is backed up by all of the data. This guy's a ridiculous finisher and an insane sort of ambidextrous player. You brought up Gafford in Washington, found this interesting. So prior to their debut on February 10th, Dallas ranked 29th in paint points. Since February 10th, they rank 5th in paint points, 6th in fast break points. Obviously, if you score a layup in transition, that counts as a paint point. So playing a little bit faster, getting out in transition more, Gafford and Washington have been huge. And you mentioned Derek Lively. And I thought, in watching that game, by the way, you're talking about the Phoenix Suns at this stage of the season. What a juxtaposition against the Denver Nuggets and how they've looked coming out of All-Star break. Best record in the league, 11-1 coming into yesterday, 11-2 now. Boston at 10-2, but Denver has had a purpose to everything they're doing. Right. I thought watching that game yesterday, there were times where I felt like Jokic was really trying to go after Derek Lively, and Derek Lively, to his credit, more than held his own against Nikola Jokic. Jokic was 2 for 8 when Lively was the contesting defender, and there were times where he tried to, I don't want to use the word punk him, but he was trying to be physical with him and use his body. Lively held his ground. I thought it was an outstanding game for him. He's been such a good rookie. And to your point about Dallas in the playoffs, he's got to be a guy who steps up and stars in his role. Where do you sort of view Dallas right now in the Western Conference in the playoffs?
Here's how I look at the West right now, because you got obviously major questions about Cat and what's going to happen in Minnesota. The Clippers couldn't look worse than they look right now. We just talked about the Phoenix Suns. OKC's been very consistently good all year. Outside of the Nuggets, who I think, I really think are in a class of their own. In fact, if it wasn't for the Denver Nuggets, I think we would all just basically go ahead and tell Boston to plan a parade route. Right? Because Boston has been so good, and yet the Denver Nuggets are still there. They're still in the league. They still look the way they look. That's the only thing standing in Boston's way probably is Denver. And so that, to me, they're still on a separate shelf from everybody else in the Western Conference. I think Dallas is right there now. They're laying claim with any of those other teams because there's just so many questions about them. And Oklahoma City just got them. And look, there's a continuity thing with Oklahoma City, and their pieces fit so great together and the way that they play. Oklahoma City would be favored in a series with the Dallas Mavericks, I believe, in a best of 7. I'm not sure I would pick Oklahoma City to win that series because of Luka and the extent to which he can control that, everything about it, and what he's already proven he can do when the stage is the biggest and the lights are the brightest. Like he has the ability to just slow everything down to a pace that he wants. And so I think they're right there now, JJ. You could put Dallas, for me, in the mix with any of those teams because there's question marks about all of them right now. And I think Dallas, they've won 5 out of 6. They've had 3 really good wins. And the one loss was to Oklahoma City. So they do have to prove themselves still. But I think, look, if Dallas continues to play out this last month and they're playing the way they're playing right now, they can avoid Denver somehow, just avoid whatever that matchup ends up being, that bracket. If they can avoid that bracket, they're going to have a great chance, man, to win a round or 2 and end up in the conference finals, I believe. Because I think they right now can lay claim to it just as much as any team out there other than Denver.
Josh Green, believe he's nursing an ankle injury. He's got to get healthy. I think yesterday they said he's got another couple weeks. They need him, his energy defensively, another guy who can knock down shots. We spend so much time. Well, I don't know if I'm going to include we in that, but I get sometimes put into these discourse conversations. We spend so much time talking about Jason Tatum and the pressure of, never having won the big one. And, he seems almost unflappable at times. Like it doesn't bother him. I think I've talked about this a couple times already this year. He's not fighting the game anymore. And he's for the most part, just making it easy. He's making the right read. We probably haven't spent enough time on the season that Jaylen Brown has had and on the play of Jaylen Brown since the All-Star break. You have a pretty strong opinion right now of sort of where Jaylen Brown is at as a player.
I think it's the best basketball he's played. And look, the guy's been great. And I've always loved Jaylen Brown because he really likes to play defense. He takes on that challenge. They don't hide him. He's going at whoever that is on that end of the floor. And so the question with Jaylen Brown has always been about like the super high level consistency, the shot selection, being able to make plays for people going either direction. That's been a problem for him at times. Having balance in his game with all 3 phases, 4 really, if you count post-ups, rim, catch and shoots, off the dribble stuff, like just balance there in his game. So he's making the right reads, counter moves to being guarded a certain way. Like these were the things and areas of growth that he needed to see out of him. I think he's put it all together, JJ. I think it's all happening for him right now as we're watching him. Since the All-Star break, he's led them in scoring 6 times, Jason Tatum 5 times. And there are nights I've watched them, and I know, look, if I listed right now, and I'm pretty sure any one of the 30 teams in the league, I could just say the team right now, and immediately I'd say, who's their best player? You're immediately going to have a name, and it's going to be the same name as mine, and the same name as most people, because it's an easily, clearly identifiable person. And it's the same thing with Boston. Like you're going to say Jason Tatum. You know what I mean? You're not going to hesitate on. You're going to say Tatum right off the bat. And my point with this is, but lately, when you're watching them, if you didn't know anything about the Boston Celtics, but you knew the game of basketball, but you'd never seen them play, and you were watching the Celtics here over the last couple of weeks since the All-Star break, there are nights you go, this just looks like that guy's team, Jaylen Brown. The way he has played, like the self-assuredness that he has played with, and the way that things are funneling in his direction. And to put it in perspective, what we're talking about here, since the break, 26 points per game. So that's several points above his season average. 54% from the field, 41% on threes. And here's, to me, one of the most, these last two are two, maybe the most important. His assist to turnover ratio in that stretch, Jaylen's like 3-1. 3-1. That's not Jaylen Brown's strength. So he's taking care, and he's never going to be a guy that's out there getting 6, 8, 10 assists like regularly. That's not really who he is. But there were a lot of nights where he'd get 3 assists and have 4 turnovers, 4 assists, 3 turnovers. Like that was like a typical stat line for him. He's almost 3-1 assist to turnover since the All-Star break. So like his decision-making and where he's taking the ball is just so much better right now. It's clean. And then the last one, you remember the game against Denver that they lost in Denver. Now Denver, 2-0 against them on the year, and 2 of the best games I've watched all season, those 2 matchups. They lose the game. Tatum struggles, could have redeemed himself if he makes a corner 3 late, didn't on a wide open look, just had a rough night. Well, you know what Jaylen Brown did in that game? 41 points, 14 rebounds. That's what Jaylen Brown did in this super high-level marquee game. Everybody's watching it. It's going to be scrutinized to the ends of the earth, knowing that Boston, they already lost once. They wanted this game. They come in there, and Jaylen Brown maybe has his best game of the year. 41 points, 14 rebounds against that team, that defense on the road on a night when his partner's struggling. So I just look at it all and I say it's come together right now for Jaylen Brown, I think at a higher level than at any point in his career. I'm enjoying watching him, I think, more than I have.
You undersold it a little bit, by the way. He's averaging 29 since the All-Star break.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
He's played in 10 of the 12 games. It's okay. It's okay, Tim. All the other stuff was correct. I think what's interesting, too, is like since the All-Star break, he's taking – obviously, everybody on Boston has had to sacrifice a little bit in terms of their usage rate. There's a little bit with Tatum and Brown for sure. But those 2 guys are still going to take the most shots on the team on average, right? Porzingis, little bit sacrifice. Drew probably is the one guy that has had to sacrifice the most just in terms of his on-ball usage. He's fitted into this role now as a spot-up guy where he's shooting the highest percentage of his career. But since the All-Star break, Jaylen Brown is averaging 2 more shots per game than Tatum. And you brought up his partner. You said his partner. And I think this is where the partnership between them is so solid right now.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a stretch to say there were times over the last 6 years, I guess it's 7 years now, but in the previous 6 years where it felt like they fought it a little bit. Not that there was internal strife, but within a game, I haven't taken a shot in a while. I've got to get my shot. Jaylen just took 4 shots, or Tatum's taking shots. I need to get my stuff, right? It doesn't feel that way right now for either of them. There's like a confidence, a self-confidence, and a comfort level with the partnership. You feel it watching the game. Tatum now has just said, all right, you know what? If they're going to put 2 on the ball early in the game, I don't need to take 8 shots in the first quarter to get myself going. I know the ball is going to come back around on this team. And so at times, I think Jaylen has just been the beneficiary of that. And obviously he can self-create. You brought up the defense. To me, when I watched the Celtics this year, it's the best he's been defensively in terms of engagement on the ball and engagement off the ball. Like he's locked in defensively. I brought him up last week with the dunker spot guys. I think there's probably, Nakai said 33 guys that are, in consideration for the 10 all defensive team spots. I think we got to like 15 names and Jaylen Brown was one of them. I think he's been excellent defensively. Of course, they have a number of guys who've been excellent defensively. It's interesting because you bring up Jaylen Brown and this is the best he's looked. And like Jason Tatum over his last 5 games is averaging 30 points, 6 rebounds, almost 6 assists, shooting 45% from 3. It's like we've just gotten numb a little bit to Tatum. We just like to highlight, oh, he had a bad game against Denver. Can he do it? And it's like, all right, there's 82 games. This guy is durable. He's going to play almost every night. He's really fucking good. Jason Tatum is really fucking good.
Yeah.
I brought up at the turn of the year, back on January 1, we did a Islands in the League episode, and we did New Year's resolutions. And my New Year's resolution for Jason Tatum was to drive more and stop taking pull-up threes. He shot, I think, 29% on pull-up threes up to that point. Last year, he was one of the worst in the NBA in terms of the high-volume pull-up three-point shooters. He's now shooting, since January 1st, he's now shooting around 40% on pull-up threes. When he's making off-the-dribble threes, this is a tough team to beat. It really is. And the last 2 points I want to make, just because I looked it up this morning. So I mentioned the records. Denver 11-2 since the break. Celtics 10-2. They've got the two best records in the NBA since the break. The Celtics offensively over the last 12 games since the All-Star break have an offensive rating of 127.8. Now, for some perspective here, right, the number one offense in the league this year, about 120. The number two offense in the league since the All-Star break. So this is not like an anomaly. All anybody's talking about, you brought up the physicality. All anybody's talking about right now, scoring is down. The officials are now letting them play, which, again, they are. This is a real thing that the officials have decided, the league has decided, we've got to give some balance. We've got to allow a little more physicality. Great. The Celtics are averaging 100, or have an offensive rating of 128 coming out of that All-Star break. When it's been mandated, we need more balance. We need more balance. 128 offensive rating over the last 12 games. That's insane. It's insane. Last point I want to make on Jaylen Brown. Think about the playoffs, right? And I think about Boston, one of the slowest teams in the NBA in terms of pace. Actually, I think they are the slowest team in the NBA in terms of pace in the fourth quarter. And I think about how the game in general slows down in the playoffs, and officials allow more. It's just natural. It happens every year. I think one of the keys to the Boston Celtics playoff run, this is obvious, but I just want to point this out. One of the keys to me is Jaylen Brown in transition. And at times, that's maybe where he's at his best. Jaylen Brown in transition in the playoffs, if he can create those opportunities, whether it's through stops, long rebounds, throw-ahead passes, whatever it may be, Jaylen Brown in transition is going to be something that I'm legitimately watching for in the playoffs.
I completely agree with that. And that when he gets opportunities where they advance the ball out of the backcourt up the sideline to him against a backpedaling defense, and sometimes that's after makes. And I saw this when I was out there in Phoenix. I completely agree with you. His ability, because he is so strong, and like you don't realize, I think, maybe even just watching him, if you're just a fan of the game, watching the Celtics on TV, how this dude's put together. He is so strong that when you throw it to him and he gets that downhill, advance, when he gets into any sort of gap, like his like force field with his shoulders and the way he can just get into people's chest and then explode off the ground and finish, it's an enormous part of his game. And I think it gets him going. Especially if he can get something early in the game, get something like that in the first quarter. It seems to like unlock him to where and then now the whole thing, he puts the whole package together. What you're talking about them with them offensively, JJ, it's just what they're doing to teams right now. Last night, another example, they played a bad team, but Hauser hits 10 threes. It's
10 threes in 23 minutes.
Yeah. They're just, and they're just having the time of their lives. Like offensively, what they're doing to people, they're absolutely destroying people. And I always say, like, the 3-point shot is how they end people, because they'll string together 4 or 5 of those. And it's just like, boom, game over. It was a pretty good game. Thanks for coming out. It went from 4 to 18 in a 3-minute stretch, because that's how they end you. But I also think that's like the one thing that if you're going to nitpick, that's their one vulnerability, right? Will they hunt that too often, too early, too quickly, and bail teams out of having to guard guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum one-on-one off the dribble? Because when they get into the paint first and then they move the ball, you try to catch up to it, there's nothing you can do to slow them down with the number of guys that are shooting that shot at a high percentage. But to get into the paint, to get to the rim, to get up the floor early, to attack early, it sets a lot of that stuff up, even the way that teams then have to think about retreating and getting back to stop that early attack. And it leads to really good stuff on the secondary breaks. So I agree with you. It's a huge part of his game. I'm not going to say that I've always loved watching Jaylen Brown play. I do now. Right now, I love watching this dude play, because he seems like it's all come together for him. And, and I've always said, like, I think like 25 to like 31, those are your best years, man, because you're maturing, you've gotten some money, you've probably got some personal accolades at that point. If you're on a good team, you've had some team success. You seem to be you get comfortable with who you are.
Yeah.
But as long as you're a grinder, you're still continuing to add stuff. Like, that's what it looks like right now for me when I watch Jaylen Brown. It's all coming together for him. And that's why there's just such, to me, clear separation with the Celtics and like everybody, certainly in the East. Like I said, if it wasn't for the Denver Nuggets being out there, I don't think there's any team that we would say can stand in the way of the Boston Celtics right now.
It's a strong take. We'll have more of those this week. Legs, you're coming up to New York. We're going to record some stuff tomorrow. We'll have a lot of Legler over the next 2 weeks. Legs, appreciate it, man. You're the best.
Man, always great. Talk to you soon.
I'll see you later.